Okay, hi, we're going to get started. I think we've got a great group. This is a really wonderful panel. The original idea was to look at the ecosystem for a particular project, and in this case, The Martian. So we have three people to talk about that, but since this is co-sponsored by the Television Academy, and the quick plug, Television Academy is dedicated to the future of TV in all of its many forms. I'm a governor of interactive media, and as many of you know, we awarded the first Emmy in VR last year to Eric's company, actually. So, and submissions actually just closed on Monday. There's a great group in for this year as well. So I think, in the interest of getting started, have a drink if you want, but why don't we just go down and have each one of you guys introduce yourselves, and we'll get right to it.
Cool. My name is Eric Shamlin. I'm managing director and executive producer of a company called Secret Location. Thanks, Seth, for mentioning the Emmy win of last year. We are a content studio for emerging platforms, and basically over the last few years we've found a lot of success in VR and a lot of passion for VR, and so we're now trying to figure out what storytelling looks like in this new medium.
And thank you. And before Ryan goes, so there's actually two television academies, and Ryan just won an Emmy a few days ago, right? So give him a hand too. For Curious and Cirque du Soleil, yeah?
Yes, although I didn't win it, Felix and Paul won it, but yes, our company won it. So I'm Ryan Horgan, Chief Content Officer of Felix and Paul Studios. We're a cinematic virtual reality studio that's tech-enabled, and we're interested in sort of a holistic view of technology that meets creative storytelling.
Thank you. And now audio.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Boshniak. I'm the CEO of Q Department, a music and sound design company. About a year and a half ago, we opened up a sound technology company focused on virtual reality, and we were lucky enough to work on the craft and feature our technology on The Martian VR, and we haven't looked back. We've just been working more and more on both creating original sound and sound design and mixing, as well as looking to create end-to-end workflow tools that allow other professionals to also work better in this medium.
Thank you.
Hi, do you want me to use the slides? Can
I? Yeah, you want to do them now? Sure, come on up.
Sure, I mean, okay, thanks.
Chris has excellent slides, and they're really quick.
It's cheating.
It's not fair. Okay, so I just wanted to explain real quick where we're coming from, because I think it's a slightly different angle that we stumbled into the VR space. And so my original company is called The Third Floor, which was created on the third floor of George Lucas's Skywalker Ranch house. And over the years, we've become our own company working on a lot of the big blockbuster movies, behind the scenes doing animated prototyping or animated design for sequences known as previs. And so over the years, we've noticed that things have started to change in the filmmaking process, and we're constantly developing new tools to create a more immersive feeling for the directors so that they can visualize in advance what they're doing. So it just so happens that as we're developing these tools and technologies for what we call virtual production, what is becoming known as virtual production, that the same tools are merging with the tools that you need to do virtual reality, like game engines, for example. So when we were blessed with better HMDs or head-mounted displays for the next wave of virtual reality, it was a perfect fit. And it surprised us too that actually now, in addition to the way in which we make movies changing, it's also about the way in which we make content for a different medium itself. So the way I look at it is, in general, that there's the film guys on one side and the games guys on the other side, and right in the middle is the sweet spot, and that's at least the way I see the creation of VR and AR content. And it really spans the gambit from the open-ended worlds of gaming to the super passive narratives that you've seen in highly crafted movies all these many years. But I think there's something in the middle that can be that semi-interactive narrative experience, and that's what we're focused on at a new company called VRC, the Virtual Reality Company, which is, if you will, the production company that is bringing together filmmakers with the right technology. And I'm a partner in that. We created this company together to make the best story-driven VR content we can muster, along with our advisor and collaborator and shareholder, Steven Spielberg, and one of my co-founders, Robert Stromberg, the two-time Academy Award winner and director of Maleficent. So we've been experimenting and creating our own original content in VR, including this piece which is called There from Robert Stromberg, and culminating in the Martian VR experience, which we were blessed to do as a collaboration with the Fox Innovation Lab. And it's a real team effort, and it should be out quite soon for everyone to enjoy. Thank you.
And we'll talk more about The Martian, but well, what a coincidence. Look at that.
So Seth roped me into this at the last minute. I'm happy to be here. I was giving another talk today. He's like, why don't you come sit in on this so that Chris and Jackie and I could spar. I'm the futurist at 20th Century Fox, which more than anything means I'm a glorified lab rat. I get to run around and try and figure out what the edges might mean someday and try and put it into practice. So by that nature, I know everybody on this panel in some way, shape, or form and have touched projects and advised. Guido and I are good friends. We've spent some time on this project together, which I think is quite interesting and emerging as a real important step. Chris and I, of course, Jackie and I, Ryan and I, of course, spend a lot of time, and Eric and I spend a lot of time, so that's what I do. It's sort of like a dragonfly, sort of moving around from place to place.
And he's doing penance because he was supposed to be on one with us last week. And he's,
yeah, I got double booked.
Now he's here. Thank you.
Anyway, happy to be here.
Yeah, Guido, please.
Good evening, Guido Voltolina with the Nokia Ozo programmer. We bring to the market the Ozo just to facilitate the artistic community to really use VR and not focus on the technical problems or challenges, but more on the artistic intent that they want to express or whatever experiment they want to do. And that's it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Hi, I'm this one. I'm Imran Ismail. I'm not a chief anything. I'm just a humble filmmaker. I'm a director, and I guess my forays into VR have come mostly with the company Verse. Some people have heard of them. I did some stuff with the New York Times. Yeah, I'm happy to be here today.
Awesome, and we'll talk about the specific ones that you did with Verse. Well, let's talk about The Martian a little bit. So, but for any of the three of you, what was the genesis of the how many of you have seen it, or at least seen previews of it? A lot of you, I imagine, right? So it's a real breakout. What was the origin of the process? I don't know if Victor's here, but the thing we originally talked about was really doing an ecosystem, and how. So 360 degrees of a project. How did it start? What was the process like?
Well, the first question to ask is there are two versions. One that is very widely distributed, which is the teaser for it. Think of it like a trailer for a movie, which is on Gear VR, that you might have seen in Milk VR. If you saw that, I guess that would be interesting to know. And then the other one is the full completed work that we all worked on, and it's almost 30 minutes in VR. It's highly interactive. It's designed for the tethered systems that are coming out. So some of you might have seen that. It's only been an installation environment so far. It hasn't been released commercially yet. We're crafting the last sort of bits of it and spit and polish to finish it up. But it launched at CES, got a lot of press there, and then it got accepted into Sundance, and there were a massive amount of lines, and a lot of people saw bits and pieces of it there. So that's the start of it. When it comes to the genesis of it, we can probably all speak to different things, but from us, it's a Fox project that was aligned with the movie The Martian, but it's its own standalone piece. Ridley Scott came to our lab, and we've had many, many people in the entertainment business at different levels come and see what we're doing and why we're doing it, and found it fascinating. And Ridley was one of those very childlike spirits that was just all about it, and couldn't get him out of the headset once we put him in it. He just wanted to see more and more and more stuff. We talked about how Andy Weir's book was so interesting because it is a first-person journey, and it, by the narrative of the book, it's agency. You know, he's trying to get himself off this perilous situation that he's got himself into through the entire arc of the book. So we thought it would make a really, really interesting exploration into what VR allows, which is a sense of space and time and a creation of a different kind of story that allows interactivity. So we basically, with Ridley's help, we brought in VRC and Third Floor and started to craft the concept. And we didn't really know where it was headed, other than we were going to craft something that was going to be highly interactive and really utilize the capabilities and the magic of virtual reality, which is fundamentally very different than flat screen media like this. So that's where we started.
That was the fun part of this challenge, and the honor of it is that we were breaking new ground together as a team, and so there was a lot of experimentation. We started out using pre-visualization as the medium to work out some of those concepts and ideas. It also was a unique situation because we had the movie, I believe, in post at the time, and there's all this amazing source material coming in from the visual effects companies as well as the filmmakers themselves. And so we wanted to make sure that we created something, I think, that kind of introduced people who may not have seen the movie to the scenario, but also give them an extended engagement for fans who actually had seen the movie. So it was a balanced approach of kind of bringing you into this experience and then giving you increasingly more challenging tasks to increase the immersion.
Yeah, if you look at sort of the imagine if and then put the colon and then plug it in, imagine if you could play the part of Mark Watney, literally be him on Mars. And one of the wonders of a thing called virtual reality is you can go to places that aren't really all that easy to go to in reality. So Mars would be one of those things. And we worked at a high level of fidelity based on Chris and his team to really focus on creating the most movie-like experience in VR at a high level of an asset creation tool set that really stressed all the systems. And as Robert Stromberg, the director of the project, likes to say, we were literally building the airplane as we were flying it. It's a really good quote because that's exactly what it was. Like, we were just figuring it out, and still to this day we're still trying to figure out some of the last bits and pieces on some of the coding challenges and about everything that's fundamentally new and different when you start working in a medium that's birthing itself right now.
And I just have to put a shameless plug in for Q Department and Jackie and Drazen and all the amazing people at Q Department, because this still is an AV medium, and a lot of people forget about the A part of the V, AV. So, I think in virtual reality is so essential. It is, it is the reason why you feel that you're suspending your disbelief. It's not so much the quality of the visuals. It's because you feel immersed in the sound. So they were super tight collaborators.
Yeah, go ahead, Jackie.
I was actually going to say, obviously a composer and a sound team work very closely with the director in a film, but with virtual reality, we had done a few virtual reality films, but nothing on the scale. And working with Fox and then also Robert Stromberg, it was interesting to me that Robert was able to create this, persistent universe that we could inhabit, being Mars. But he was especially good at it because he came from a background of production design and art direction. I thought he was a really smart choice as a director because, he has won Oscars for Alice in Wonderland, Avatar. So he was able to create this persistent universe that you could inhabit, and we just had to create the sound to bring it to life. So it was a really interesting opportunity for us, for sure.
We talked about this, I think, a year and a half ago before The Martian. One of the fascinating things about the origin of VRC is at third floor, you've done previs for so many movies. So when you come into this new space, you've got this mass of learning about how to create a really amazing, rich experience. You've got a big staff. There's institutional learning as opposed to a lot of people who are sort of starting from scratch. Did that inform the process?
Well, I guess we had an unfair advantage because we were, contrary to a lot of the other amazing people in Hollywood that are working on building final product and final highly rendered imagery, we have a history of building real-time stuff, and it just so happens that on this side of virtual reality, on the highest ends of the tethered headsets, I think the most effective stuff is the CG or the game engine enhanced virtual reality at the moment. So we were well prepared to just make anything that our directors desired, at least in advance of the final product. And so now we're gearing up to do a lot more detailed work in the future. But to do great virtual reality, you need both this amazing creative, you need the ability to actually do it, and this is inherently different than a lot of the linear medium. And you also need a really good business sense because this is an emerging, growing market, and it's a little wild, wild west out there. But
So, from the perspective of Verse or Secret Location or Ryan and Paul, I mean, when you guys are looking at projects, I mean, what do you think of as the key elements to doing something interesting, or what are the things in the process of creating work? There's always, right, if a project is great, there's this moment where you discover something or something happens in the process that brings it to life. Where have you found those? Because you can draw on any, you guys do a lot, there's a lot of immersive journalism to some extent happening at Verse. You all do different things. You're working with Cirque du Soleil. You worked with Fox on the TV side. I mean, what are some of the things that you guys have found? Anybody?
We should let Ryan talk about it.
Yeah, sure. I think it always starts with the point of view of the user or the viewer, and what's the context for that experience, and who are you as a participant in the story, whether you're third person or first person, or in the case of our Jurassic World experience, you're sort of sitting between first and third. You know, you don't have a body, but there's some context for your existence there. There's a Jurassic Park vehicle, there's a walkie-talkie, there's a thermos, you're sort of sitting on a log. And we tried to create the context of you're a park ranger and you're taking your coffee break, and there's a sleeping dinosaur who wakes up. We didn't want to scare you. This was, over a year plus ago, so we didn't want to start you off with a T-Rex. So the idea was, how can we set the context for a friendly experience with a
You have to
dinosaur?
create the cue to let people know that the dinosaur is not a villain.
Yeah, and just also like, why are you there? What's the purpose of your presence there in the scene? So I think whether it's that or what we did with Fox and Wild, with Reese and Laura, we're also playing with point of view, and there's a moment where you're in the third person clearly, and then Reese looks right at you, and you think maybe I'm in the first person for a moment. But then we realize, no, Laura Dern's behind you. They're just looking kind of through you.
Great.
So we're sort of playing with what is your role. I think that's important.
That's awesome.
What's interesting about their work, about Felix and Paul's work, is they're actually starting to build a style. And all of their work, like, there are musical artists that have a certain style, and while they have variances in that style, it's a style. Like, their work, and it has an imprint and a footprint. And, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I see out of every piece that they do are there are more similarities than differences. They are all about bringing you into an experience and then holding you in that experience for a certain period of time and letting you settle into the moment, which is one way to approach the concept of immersion and presence and the beginnings of virtual reality in the toughest medium of all to do virtual reality, which is live action.
Yeah, and I think it started with just that, like, how can we capture a moment that you believe you're actually in? And that's the first thing they did with Patrick Watson Strangers, where you're just simply with a guy playing piano, but the context and all the nuance in the construction of that scene was meant to say, who are you as the viewer? You're his friend, you're sitting in a close proximity, but not close enough to be a girlfriend. And the window's open. We actually opened the window. That was an act of choice, so that we could hear the sound coming in from outside. And we have people who watch that experience, and you can hear the grinding of the truck plowing the snow outside. And it's very subtle, but usually people come out of that, they don't know why, but they said, oh, that was winter, and that's the reason why, but it's a very subtle cue. So I think in VR for us, all of these subtleties matter, and it's not like film where you kind of have the foreground and the background. You have lead actors and you have day players. I think everyone sort of is in more equal footing in VR.
Do you have something else? No? I mean, I was going to say that's a really interesting observation, because in the different things that you've done, even the Clinton thing felt to me like an F&P thing, even though it's completely different from some of the other stuff that you do.
I think people are learning from them. There's a style that they've established that others are feeling like this is one of the right ways to approach the medium.
And to some extent that's going, so Chris definitely, so how many of you are familiar with, like, what's the general, how many of you have seen a lot of different experiences? Or you maybe some, not too much. Okay, so the Verse stuff, which is obviously, to your point, the New York Times led with a lot of Walking New York and so on. What's the process like? So you're an independent filmmaker that works with Verse?
Exactly, yeah.
So you want to talk about that
I'm
part?
sure. I mean, for me, VR is just another medium, and I think it's this big magical thing. It's amazing. It's really technical. There's a lot of stuff to it, but it always starts with the same thing, kind of like everything else. It just starts with the story. What are you trying to express? What are you trying to tell? And then in that way, it's not very different. When you start there, it's like, why would you tell a very introspective story in film? You might want to write a book. It's not very different to that, in that it's like, it's a little more immersive. And then there's many technical challenges, and obviously point of view. There's so many subtleties that we won't even go into in this point. Like, how do you get people to look where you want them to look? Because I think that's important. Personally, some people are just, they have different thoughts on that. But it's still very expressive, and it's still, it's once you have the story, once you know what you want to do, once you know how you want to communicate it, then it's an emotional tone kind of throughout how you're trying to tell the story. So you've got your beats you're trying to hit, you've got your tone, your pacing, and then it becomes very similar to other mediums and other storytelling kind of styles. And then, when you look at, like, let's call it like immersive documentaries in that kind of way, well, that is about trying to put you somewhere, but it's also about trying to let you have a little relationship with these people, to be in their lives, as opposed to I'm just standing here watching. And then that is a certain kind of play that you have there as well. And again, there's a lot of little subtleties that we use and that we're all figuring out how to do differently from one project to the next. And I think that's probably the big thing for all of us to remember. I'm sure that all of us on the stage, you guys might have it figured out, but I feel like we're all just trying to figure out in each project as we do it. And for me, it starts with, again, what you're trying to express, the emotions, tones, and then that kind of opens up new doors. And then you're like, wait a minute, can we do this? Okay, well, we should do it because this is how you want to get the point across. And once you do that, then I feel like all the tech kind of challenges, and it's incredible what's going on from project to project, how many, like, just how it keeps getting better and better, and all the tech challenges continue to improve. But I like to think that it comes from a purpose. But anyway, I don't know if that answered your question at all.
Well, one thing I
Yeah.
want to add to this is what is interesting in seeing many production is that one is the learning and the style and so on, but also the intensity of the reaction when you do it right is really like 10 times fuller, right? So if the sound is right and the video is right, then people come out and really are, emotionally involved. Versus when you fail to do that, and we fail many times, then you see just doesn't work. It's almost like binary. Either it works and it's super intense, or just don't do it.
Is that intensified by the fact that you're streaming live? Talk a little bit about, you just did the World Cup, was that last night?
We're testing now, yeah.
Okay.
Well, the live streaming is just one other way of using VR and really feeling being there. But in live streaming, like in other productions, it is a production. So you can't just put the camera there. It will be a 360 webcam. It's really boring, and you're isolated. You cannot talk to anybody, and in 5 minutes you're completely bored. So even in that case, the whole production and the storytelling of whatever event it is has to be there and has to be thoughtful.
You had some, Chris.
Well, yeah, it just sounds like we're all talking about that we're at the cusp of creating some sub-genres of different types of VR that are all going to be experienced by different demographics in society. And, I think that as the technology gets clarified and new things start coming out, that actually can birth a whole new subgenre. Like, a lot of stuff we're experimenting with has to do with branching stories. Like, everyone always wants to get back to the roots of the choose your own adventure. Can you have some sort of a subtle choice to make, even if you don't realize you're making that choice, and you compare notes with your friends who saw that experience that you thought was something linear, and you're like, oh wait, you went down that path and I went down the other. Well, I have to see it again. So hopefully that will drive a longer engagement or repeat viewings, which I think is very interesting from the creator standpoint. But it's not like everything has to be that complex, right? I think there's going to be the simple genre of we're just selling experiences. It's being in the rainforest, and that's going to be great for doing your yoga and chilling out, and you might collect a bunch of different natural places on Earth to be part of your library, and I think people will be willing to pay for that if it's done at a high level of capture.
There's a moment in The Martian, actually, which felt kind of like a rondo where you're throwing is it potatoes?
Potatoes.
But then there's other physics going. So you're actually in this one area of The Martian, and you can stay there, I guess, as long as you want, right?
Yeah.
So actually, like, stupidly, when I first heard about it, I said to somebody, "How long is it?" And they said, 20 to 30 minutes, and it took me a second just from everything being on Rails to realize, oh, okay, I can stay in there longer. So was the process of design of that, can you go back to that and additively, so you can actually expand that world even after the thing's done, which it sounds like you're
which
sort of,
we're discussing and debating on how we do it. So we made a choice to drive you through the narrative because it was designed not to be a game. It was designed to be an interactive experience that has game-like interactive capabilities, which is actually fundamentally different than a game with objectives and achievements. So you do move through the story essentially regardless of your choices, sort of. There's a lot of sort of in VR that you're kind of figuring out, but because the medium, it's actually a really interesting area of discussion, and all of you guys have touched on it in some fashion with the work that you're doing. The medium allows interactivity, which is what Chris is touching on when he talks about branching narrative and choose your own adventure. Choose your own adventure is this sort of trite thing that everybody's been trying to do and it never really worked because the medium itself never actually was native to allow it to do it. Whereas games are actually choose your own adventure constantly. Like you can navigate wherever you want in that world, and gamers understand that. So they've been choosing their own adventures for the last 30 years. And the game designers have a certain story ethos where they create and understand that and build story accordingly. So when people say, well, games don't have story, I violently disagree with them. They have massive and sometimes extraordinarily complex and nuanced story. It's just different than a movie or a television show. But because the medium itself, one of its core tenets is you can interact. It's spatial. You have your hands in the highest end of the art forms. That things that don't fully engage all those senses, I think will start to fall off to the fringes. And like what I sort of explain in my talks is when television moved from black and white to color, color started to become the edge case, and then it really is an edge case. Doesn't mean it's not important, doesn't mean it's not artistic, but the medium started to say we can do color, so then it started to demand that you would do things in the medium. VR allows and demands for things that engage more of your senses than just your eyeballs, than your visual cortex. It gives you the opportunity to do this with Chris, and he could interact back with it, and all of these things, which I can't do on a flat panel television, certainly not effectively. So what we're seeing as the most powerful experiences in the medium, which then would go to Eric's thing with Sleepy Hollow, if you want to talk about that, because that's something that we touched and I was involved in, helping that along too. They experimented and understood it, and I won't give too much away, but there's a very violent act at the end that is interactive to your body.
It's Ichabod Crane at Sleepy Hollow. Maybe you can figure it out.
So anyway, it's an important thing to think about.
Yeah, do you want to talk about?
No, it's sort of like summing up a lot of what everybody's been saying is we're kind of at the birth of a medium, and so what's been fun is to watch the rules like change in real time. 2 years ago, you couldn't edit, you couldn't move the camera. There was just these like things you just couldn't do, and we now know very well that you can do all of those things, but they're different in VR. They're not. There are rules to doing those things, moving the camera in particular. And so with Sleepy Hollow, obviously it's Ichabod Crane. We're not giving away too much. The payoff is the Headless Horseman chops your head off. And so we had to fight on that.
It was really interesting.
We had to fight. Oculus, who was our sort of a platform partner on that, refused to let that go live because they were afraid it would cause nausea. Just like everybody at Comic-Con would just have the worst Oculus experience ever. But thankfully,
and I was
Fox
sort
had
of on the other side saying, we should totally do it. Let's try it. What's the worst that could happen? People maybe will get a little sick, but they're getting their head cut off, for God's sake. Of course they're going to get sick.
Just do it at the end.
Let's do it. That's what we do.
Yeah, it's the last thing. It's a safe bet, but
And it worked tremendously well.
Yeah.
I don't think very many,
Nobody.
very small,
It's
maybe
so
1%.
quick and so sort of well done because you know it's coming, so it's not a complete shock.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, and to your point about to Chris's point, I think about cues, you sort of you don't telegraph it, but you're in a graveyard, and it's sort of hyper real, and it's not super real. So by the time it comes, you don't feel like it happened to you. Yeah. It's sort of part of the.
And you see the axe come down, like you're ready for it when
But
it
you still
happens.
go.
It still gets
Kind
everybody
of
when
do
you put
feel
it
it
on.
happened to me. That's the point.
It's the best version of getting your head chopped off.
That's
Because you get to come back
in the
again.
best possible sense. Getting your head chopped off in the best possible sense. But when it's funny because when Avatar, and I guess maybe this was Robert, anybody remember in Avatar, what were they called? It's been a while now. The things, the glowy.
Mushroomy things?
The firefly things, right?
Oh, I
What are
don't
those
know what
called? I
those
don't
are
know
called.
what they're called.
The firefly things.
The firefly things in Avatar. that was like this extraordinary use of that tech. That was a story moment. To your point, it was an ambient story moment. It wasn't a narrative story moment, but it used that platform of cinematic 3D in such an astonishing way. Like, I felt the same way. This isn't a spoiler because it happens at the beginning, but in The Martian, you're watching this thing happen, and then suddenly, I forget the camera move, but you're behind the helmet, and then you're him,
Right.
and it just works. That it doesn't sound like it would, but it's really beautiful. Was that hard to get at, or I mean, was that a?
Not particularly hard. It was,
I mean, the filmmakers or VR directors think about this a lot, of what kinds of cues you need to do to lead in so that you know when they pop you into a new reality or a new position in space, that you're fully prepared to accept that you are now Mark Watney, Matt Damon in the spacesuit. You know, so there's a lot went into that and how we ease into it. So there's a lot of, I think, common thinking among the work I've seen among the panelists, in that you do have to sell the environment first and give the audience a little bit more breathing room to kind of feel it out, acclimate. The Oculus Story Studio guys talk about this all the time, and then you can start being more and more bold, because you are kind of leading people into the suspension of disbelief.
Should we talk a little bit more about audio, because it's such a huge part of when this stuff works? And somebody just said, when it works, it's astonishing. So much of that is about oral cues and the effect of moving through a space, and the audio can, it's been such a huge part of cinema and games and television all along, but here it's even more so. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as people say it's 50% of the experience, and I think that's true. I also think VR is a very unforgiving medium, in the sense that if there's inconsistencies or lack of quality or latency, you immediately break that presence and it's over. So I think sound is really important to maintain that system of disbelief, that suspension, that you're really there. And I also think that it's a much different value proposition. I think in Hollywood, it's more part of an emotional toolkit that the director uses to almost manipulate the audience into feeling what's going to happen or what's coming up, whereas in VR, you've got to sort of almost stand back and give less and just allow it to be. And that was an interesting learning curve for us, is like you can do less and just let it be and let that person feel that presence. And then also from the perspective of working with a director, I think it's a very different value proposition, because sound is very malleable. You can lead, and the viewer finds himself in a sandbox, and sound can help direct him in a certain direction or can misdirect him. So it's a very malleable tool that can almost help the director edit the story in a sense, where you are leading people with sound. You don't have to do that, but it's something that you can do.
And also keep in mind that within the video game engine type of previs, most people can place the sounds at specific points in space. So as you get closer to something, lean in on it, it not only sounds louder, but it's actually emanating from that particular point in space. And there's a whole cloud of different sounds, and that can be a cacophony of a sort of a symphony that comes together that you get to explore along with the visuals. So I think people tend to underestimate the complexity of implementation of good sound, regardless of the creative vision, into the VR headsets.
In The Martian, I feel like a good sound moment is the dust storm. There's like this, we actually early on had a conference call with a NASA jet propulsion scientist who told us about the weather on Mars, and it was really much about, like, the Martian movie actually was very accurate to science, and this piece was also there was continuity between the film and the VR piece, so it was interesting to also try to recreate things that could be possible on Mars, and I think that's a good moment.
It's also, you should talk about all these little
Yeah,
points
let's
on
go
here
to
too,
that.
but I'll wrap that up, because also it's an interesting story point about the craftsmanship and the time and energy it took to build the Martian piece. It was almost a year in process, probably 9-10 months of active work, and that dust storm moment was actually not in the beginnings of the creation of it. There's a section where you're moving the solar panels and the rovers. It's very interactive. But we kept watching it, we kept feeling like it didn't have enough peril. It wasn't actually exciting enough from a cinematic standpoint. So came up with this idea in one of our sort of brainstorming session saying, what if we added a storm that came from one section of the landscape? Like it's literally far, far away, but it's deep on the right side so that the sound can lead it. And the minute you look over, you just see a little bit, like it's tiny, it's very far away. And then each time you look back, now you have to do things, so you have to accomplish something. So you have to pay attention to this, or you're gonna run out of time and die. And then each time you look back, you hear the sound is actually triggering you to make you look over and over again toward the peril. And then 3 or 4 times in, it's now a really big dust storm, like a tsunami coming over you, and then it actually starts to attack you. And the sound starts to pink on the helmet. And it's quite real, and you start like actually feeling like this is happening to you. But of course, it's not really happening to you, but the sound is more important than the visual at that point to make you believe that it's actually happening.
And then you take that to the next level with, we've been partnering with the guys at D-Box.
Which was another crazy experiment just last minute. Yeah.
Well, thank God you're so crazy that you let us play with all of these amazing partners together, and I think it was well worth it because it took it to a whole new level. And for me, it convinced me that there's going to be some sort of kiosk-based industry for a premium VR experience, maybe at theaters, malls, the Premiere, that where you don't necessarily have to have it all set up to this level with the more expensive chairs or whatnot in your home, but you can go and pay admission and experience a ton of things with your family like you would at a theme park. And I think that's going to be important to drive adoption, because in that particular scene, not only are you hearing this very convincing sound, but the chair is moving, so you're trying to like hold on to the handles, and you get increasingly nervous.
We essentially made a theme park ride out of it. By adding the motion characteristics of the seat, as again, one of these harebrained experiments, let's just try it, see what it does, because it was so engaging, and we're just like, I wonder if, there's a lot of I wonder if in our meetings, and we worked with the D-Box guys, they said, sure, we'll get you a chair. They linked it up, so the timing all worked, and then suddenly it's magic, it's an illusion.
Do you retune the haptics when the chair's not, is the haptic experience in your hands different when the chair's there from when it's not?
No,
It's just
it's
like
just
you have
the
to do
timing of
multiple
the
formats based on the...
No, it's additive, it's just
Okay.
timing of all the things that happen in the environment get added, and the chair moves up, down, and around, so there's a moment where you actually exit the space capsule. And although the chair is literally only moving like 3 or 4 inches up, your whole body goes, and you actually feel like it's really happening.
Yeah, it's
Which is
amazing.
why we call it virtual reality.
So let's talk about the future. We talked about audio. Let's talk about the future of camera technology and video. What's the philosophy of Ozo, and what do you see as the future of camera tech? And
Well, of course, the philosophy is that audio is 50% or maybe even 60% of the experience. And we really believe there are 2 stages. One is capturing all the elements so that when you play back, you don't break the presence. That is like level 1, and it's fundamental to stay in the experience. It's like any artifacts in the visual as well in the audio has to be accurate so that your brain really focuses in experiences and not adjusting or compensating. And then the second level is like the Martian. Then you take to, okay, now I'm using it to create strong emotion, because now you are here, you are in Mars, you are whatever place it is, so, capture a stadium or whatever, but then I can mix the sound even further, because now I want to play with you. But those 2 stages are essential, because if the first stage is not reached, then you're not there, and
Well,
then everything breaks.
There's 8 spatial mics on the camera, which is one of the things I loved about this concept and design, is it's not just about picture, it's about directional sound on the same device. So if you're going to put in a sporting event and they're coming from one side or the other, the sound will pick up accordingly. It's a really smart technology.
Awesome. Well, let me get a sense of the volume of questions. I know you had one, Will, right? Does he still? You want to ask it?
Sure. In the OG days when we look at interactive experiences around games that would tie into films, and typically the time for a console game would take 18 months or more to create that experience versus, a film could be greenlit under that time. And we wanted a day-to-day experience to kind of build the market and all the things you guys know. So my question is, on The Martian, film came out, the VR experience is out a number of months after that experience.
I guess that's for me. We got it greenlit because we built some excitement about new concepts and media experiences at the highest levels at the studio. So evangelizing and talking about these new platforms and the way that this might become something, and we can wait for it to come and get run over. Okay, that's one option. We can dip our toes in the water, which we're seeing a lot of movie studios do, and sort of figure it out, maybe little marketing tools and experiments. And I just wasn't personally a big fan of that. I was like, look, it's going to take the same amount of effort to go all the way into the deep end of the pool and then try and figure out how to swim to shore than it is to sort of dip your toes in the water, which isn't what Chris did in the previous side of it. It's the same story, just a different time and a different period of life. So we just went for it. And we started with Felix and Paul, and we did this wild thing that we said, we're going to go for this, and we're going to bring the real actors in, and we're going to actually do something big and important that way and see what happens. And it became a viral hit. And then we said, well, now we're going to up our game, and now we're working on a few other projects, which will get announced when they're ready to be announced. But they're incredibly ambitious, and one of the things we realized is that someone needs to be the one at the tip of the spear saying, we're the ones that want to target ambition and target the possibilities of the medium and just take a shot. Like, what's the worst that can happen? It doesn't work out. We think there's a much worse scenario of not taking the shot and then watching other entities come and eat a lunch that might be somewhat theoretical right now, but at some point it's going to come true, and there's going to be a real lunch to be eaten. So we want to eat that lunch. So we figure we'll go ahead and put the sandwich spread and the bologna on the bread and start eating, and that's what we did.
From an artistic perspective, I'm excited about working with the filmmakers a little bit earlier on in the process, and now that some of the tech has been pioneered and we've forged through the valley of death to get all of this stuff to happen, we have learned so much, and we now could conceivably begin at the beginning stages and literally in parallel with the main feature filmmakers or that television show or whatever it is that is being created, to create the true linked transmedia experience that perhaps the actual director of the main experience would at least participate in, if not direct themselves.
We also think this is an interesting point and might be relevant for you guys too, and I've been quite public about this in various speeches, including at the big Oculus conference and stuff, that as much as we're, of course, hyper concerned and interested in all the IP that Fox owns and maintains and delivers into the marketplace, we see that new mediums give an opportunity for new voices and new creativity that literally doesn't come from the previous medium, that only comes and works, probably to your world, only works in the world of virtual reality or some new immersive format that may or may not be using a headset. A headset is just one application of building immersion and intensity. So we think as much as we're cultivating our A-level product, we're also cultivating new ideas, new voices, new people that want to make this their medium and not moving from the mediums of traditional into a new medium. This is going to be their thing, and they're going to develop, and we're going to see new movie stars, new characters, new concepts created that will live in VR and then may migrate backwards into traditional media, but certainly not migrate the other way. So we think it's a really interesting posture that we're taking.
For any of the three of you guys, for Verse or for FMP or for you, I mean, what do you see? I mean, in terms of it's just kind of an axiom that breakthrough artists tend to happen when there's a change in the platform. Almost always. It's almost never that a great artist happens in the, it's somebody finds, like, I don't know if any of you saw Alumet. I kind of thought that had that quality. It's a Tribeca now. But I mean, how do you, when you guys look at your companies, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think, what Ted was saying earlier, it was very important for someone in Hollywood to do what Ted and Fox is doing, because Silicon Valley was not going to do this. They're making great hardware, but someone had to be in front and say, we're going to go into the deep end. And I think there were a lot of nervous media companies saying, oh, I don't know, there's no monetization. And, it takes a lot to do that. And now I see a lot of these media companies looking at Fox sort of saying, oh, interesting, like they're super bullish, like maybe we need to think about this. And I think it's good that someone was willing to be first, and I think to Chris's point, it is important to partner with IP that's relevant and has an audience, because that's how we're going to grow the user base, but also at the same time, we do have to grow the young voices, and they're going to sort of both coalesce. And I do think that the IP is going to flow down from movies and TV into VR, and also up from VR native content into TV and film, and that's where we want to be. Is we want to focus on both.
Excellent.
We've had to sort of build sort of creative coalitions, for lack of a better term, because right now it's hard to find like a single filmmaker or a single voice that really own the whole thing, because of the limitations of interactivity. It's at its highest end, it's a very visual effects intensive medium. It's also a game medium. There's just a lot of potentially moving parts, and so we've had to sort of build coalitions where the writer might have more of like a theatrical, like a theater background. So theater in the round, telling stage plays, and maybe that's the way to do it. Or is the writer more of a game developer because of that choose your own adventure sort of inherently interactive nature? So a lot of times it does start with sort of the writer and finding the right voice to tell the story in this medium. But then, as we onboard directors, be they veterans or new kids out of college or whatever, we've had to sort of surround them with these minds that are masters of various mediums, be it games or visual effects or whatnot. So right now it's I do think there is going to be a wave of filmmakers or creative voices that will be leading this or driving this medium. But right now it's you're on the search for that talent, but then having to sort of ensure them with some veteran talent, frankly.
So for any of you, without it becoming a platform discussion or a tactical thing, are there moments that you look at and think, this could, so I imagine, for example, for you or for The Martian, right, the more people there are going to storefronts, the more you can sell premium experience. That's a good thing, right? That may not be the defining thing. But there's a proliferation of cardboard, there's Note, I guess, the Samsung. What are the sort of moments that you guys look at and say, we've got this thing, once this opens up more, this is really going to be an interesting opportunity for anybody? Is there any, go ahead.
I just think that there's multiple catch-22s right now that are very frustrating to the independent filmmaker trying to get their VR out to the marketplace in a monetized way. But I think once all the tethered headsets are released and the next wave of even more well-designed, even more comfortable mobile headsets are out there, there will be an established marketplace for this. Already you can log into, say, the HTC Vive store on Steam, and there's people buying, thousands of copies, and I don't know the statistics, but it's a lot of people downloading VR experiences from $10 to $30 or more dollars. So
and there's 30 to 40 of them now on the platform.
I played them all last weekend.
Yeah. I do it
with my
every
daughter,
weekend.
who was in one of the experiences for 4 hours. So to any of the naysayers that say people are going to pick this up and just toss it away, I say, look at my daughter and her friends and the parties that they have in my house, and they're all about it. We need to drive the content into those stores, and I think that's going to open up new opportunities for the new generation filmmakers in this area.
I would probably say that, and this might be contrarian to what you might think from a guy like me, I would say it's actually important not to care. It's important not to care what the platforms are doing or when they're going to succeed or how they're going to succeed. It's just important to have a belief structure. If you believe that the one thing we all know about the world of entertainment is that change is always going to happen in some fashion, then you want to look out for that change, and you want to shepherd that change and help it along and guide it along. I've used the sort of reference of Netflix in the early days, when there was no real viable way to stream media on a thing like that. It was just a pipe dream. But they called the company Netflix, not Mailflix, even though they were mailing the DVDs because that was the only way they could distribute the media. So they had a belief structure in the future, and the tool sets and the pipes weren't even there to set the stage for the future. So right now, the stage is being set for the future of the medium, for the future of what could be possible. And we're seeing a lot of activity and a lot of traction, but it's important not to hang your hat on that. What you want to hang your hat on is that if you believe that media will change and people will adopt to new forms of media, as in everybody looking at their phone and holding their phone, and this gentleman here recording us. And these are big changes that happen that are completely normal now. But that wouldn't be normal a generation ago.
It wasn't normal 8 years ago.
There'll
or-
be a
or 10
completely
years
new
ago.
normal. And the ones that don't think about, I wonder if it's going to happen, are the ones that are going to make it happen. So that's kind of what.
Real quick, I want to just say this because it's a great story, even though it's almost irrelevant. But Netflix actually, I asked Ted Sarandos once, because he's a film guy. He was interested in film, and television has turned out right to drive it. I asked him what happened that made that happen. Was there a strategic decision? Here's what happened. They had, remember, for those of you will remember, Vongo was an old streaming TV service, and they had all of these rights, and Starz, the parent company, had a bunch of movies, and the owner, John Malone, said, screw it, we're not giving our movies to Netflix anymore. So Netflix were back on their heels, and they said, well, can we have your TV stuff? And that's when the pivot happened. They didn't even see it coming. It's just an interesting...
The unexpected journey.
Yeah,
is
the things that show up along the way.
I
You
mean,
gonna say- go
I
ahead.
also think
Yeah.
like to your point, Ted, is like in VR, all planning is almost arrogant. You just got to iterate and reiterate. And the one funny thing is kind of like with The Martian, I felt like Mark Watney had to science the shit out of Mars to get off Mars. I feel like we all had to science the shit out of VR to get The Martian done. And it started off on a certain bitmap, but then it became a lot of different things because there was a sort of willingness to sort of, even like with the third floor, they would say, all right, your code broke, you've got 48 hours to fix it, or we're going back to the other middle way. And we're like, what?
Or Ted's friends show up.
And then we go and help
Don't
fix
fix
it.
No, it's broken. You better fix it. And there was a sort of willingness to just iterate and reiterate until it was right. And I thought that was a very exciting edge to be on, and to be on this level with these kind of people was very exciting. And I think it shows in the products, like that presence and what you experience when you're in it is it's exponentially better than a lot of other experiences.
I mean, the enthusiasm I see both from the creative side and from the studios now has restored my faith in the industry, honestly. I think it's a breath of fresh air for everyone. And I think this is going to be the driver of a lot of new business, but also a lot of new great forms of art that will be out in the marketplace. And if you doubt it, in terms of if that marketplace will be there, then you have to think not myopically just about the entertainment industry. We tend to be so focused on our world that we know so well, but this is happening with or without entertainment coming on board, right? The internet's going to look very different. Augmented reality is going to be here before we know it. The web will look really mundane if you watch it on a screen glued to your mouse and your keyboard. You're literally going to have a much more interactive way to go and select things, and in a sort of a Minority Report sort of way to dive into new locales and storefronts, and all this stuff is happening. So it only makes sense that entertainment is there and available for when people get tired from buying things on the online stores.
Yes, the fundamental shift is really from rectangle, picture rectangle, web rectangle, everything rectangle. The cinema is rectangle, and now suddenly we're free of the rectangle. and so once you're free of the rectangle, it could be interactive, it could be productivity, it could be entertainment. It's just you're free of the rectangle. The rectangle is backward.
Mm-hmm. I see 4 screens in here, maybe more that won't be here in 5 or so years.
Absolutely.
Do you have something?
I'll just say, I think Steve said something, he said a word that I haven't heard much since I've been last night or kind of around, and obviously this is very tech, it's a very tech time, but he said the word art, and it's fascinating that is like, that's what excites me about being in this space, and I think just in general, I think the tech is probably, we're still working it through, and it's probably it's probably further ahead than the creative people are at this point, or the people who might want to express themselves through it. And so I think we haven't seen a big influx of just everybody. I mean, you had some amazing names. I can't, Mark Stromberg, people that's incredible. And so like, we're going to just see an explosion of people looking at this and being like there's just something inside me that I want you to see, to experience. Can I put you inside my head? It's incredible. Just that's such a great opportunity to do that, and it's just another way to do it. And so that there alone will just take it to places that we can't even think of it. And I think when I think about what the tech will be, it kind of makes my head spin. But I know that at some point we're going to be looking to connect as human beings and to share what's inside of me, and for you to see some of that, and to kind of, and that's ultimately what it's going to be about beyond anything else. And
I mean,
yeah,
I would say that there has been more apprehension over the years for hardcore traditional filmmakers to use visual effects than there is for the same filmmaker to, once properly introduced to the potential of VR, to say, yeah, sure, I wouldn't mind doing one of those. Because they see it as, I guess, purpose-built for a different reason.
And to your point, to Guido's, once you have a world through AR or whatever, all the different ways it can happen, where there's depth, are you really going to consider a flat screen in a dark room, you know, the pinnacle of your experience? Or does it sort of, it's like once color television is there, the evolution's coming. It may take 50, whatever, but it's for, some artist is going to go, shit, there's a canvas and I'm going to draw on it, right?
Oh, God.
How does that affect for anybody? How many more, are there more questions? Yeah, go ahead.
How many cameras did you use? What manufacturer?
On
For which project? Yes.
Well, I'm cautious that, there's 2 or 3 projects. I mean, it's a general question.
The Martian is primarily CGI imagery, all created in a game engine tool called Unreal. And then the connective tissue between the interactive experiences are actually clips from the movies that move around in a spatial sense. So we kind of take a piece from the traditional world, map it into a sphere, to your point, to it, so it's broken out of the rectangle, although in this case it's actually multiple rectangles because it's from the traditional movie. But that's not really what the piece is about. The piece is about the playing the role. It's a role-playing piece. And then the way we move you from scene to scene is we use, because we work for the studio and we have access to all that material, we use scenes from the movie that are the key scenes that lead you from scene to scene. That was our vehicle for this particular project. It probably won't be in the future. That was where we started with. Does that answer the question?
So you could take any film and create what you create?
We could, but we probably wouldn't. In fact, I could almost guarantee you we won't.
The principle is you don't have to actually go out and shoot in VR.
if you have enough money.
No, well, I mean, it's a pretty nuanced question. Now, you can take traditional assets from the rectangular traditional media, film, television world and bring them into a virtual reality spatial sense, but you're taking assets from the past and throwing them into a spatial environment. Like we put movies, we have a whole catalog of movies, and Fox and Lionsgate were the first to do it on Gear VR. You can download full movies and watch them in a virtual movie theater in virtual reality, and there's a social connection point, and there's all kinds of interesting things. But that's blending the two worlds. What we're really focused on is how do we crack the code and make a whole new code.
So that's great. Do we know what camera originally the Martian was shot on?
Red cameras. It's all shot on red cinema movie cameras.
On red.
Mm-hmm.
Something he knows a little bit about.
Yeah, I was one of the guys that helped make that. So.
Phil, what were you going to say?
No, I'd like to hear from your honest response to the question, what cameras are you using? Because you're shooting live.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't even really want to talk about the cameras just because they're going to change by the time we leave here. But, I mean, there's technical issues in shooting virtual reality live. There's parallax, which I think if you understand what that means. And so you have to use the smallest possible sensors and smallest possible cameras that get you as close to there with the best image quality. And I think it's, you know, GoPros are the basis of essentially what is the most easiest thing to work on, to take with me to South Sudan or to war zones or whatever like that. But at the same time, it's not the best quality, and it's going to continue to get better. Sensors, everything, you know, the curve. So it's less. I think you know, there's technical challenges that are being overcome every day, and so, you know, there's a different camera already that I think that we're using that maybe I can talk about, maybe I can't. But it's so less, you know, less focus on that. The technology is going to continue to evolve real quickly, but maybe more just what you do with it. You know, I think that would be, if there's one thing, then I think that's kind of my drum that I would beat.
And we're going to find spatial as the next horizon of live action as well. Today, CG does spatial effectively very well. Live action is still in its exploratory experimental state, but it is coming, and it will be the medium of the day for the highest end of virtual reality.
So
actually, spatial cameras.
by that, like, you know, I think you mean holographic video, or volumetrically capturing an entire performance 360. So you can think of it as, instead of the cameras in a virtual reality rig looking outward, what if they were to look inward, and then you have a subject in the middle that is analyzed from every angle, and you reproduce that asset and that clip, and you can play it back. And that's fundamentally going to change the way we think about, as filmmakers, I think, pulling together our stories when you can manipulate assets like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this, and this.
Even if you don't go
Like I do
there,
in the
it's
real
kind of
world.
nice to know you can.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's the thing. Is that,
Volumetric,
yeah, I mean, motion capture has been the only way to do this traditionally in the past, to have the great artistic performer perform the best they can and translate their movement and sometimes facial features onto an avatar, that if you work really, really hard and you turn up the volume on your GPU, you can get it to look very close to a human being, but probably not as convincing enough for this audience that that's absolutely that performer's real performance. So it's a lot of heavy lifting that only is perfect for certain types of projects and in high-end gaming. So we need to get past that, and because we need to be more of a television studio to create content, and you can't have all that kind of baggage. So this is the answer to that. Well, why don't we just capture the real performance? Which you see a lot in photogrammetry and whatnot for capturing like what that, this whole auditorium, we could scan it very quickly and create a version of this here. But that's only a static, still piece of geometry.
But it would allow you to move around in it. As opposed to just watch it, you could actually teleport yourself around it.
So that's all coming, and it's gonna, I think, merge the worlds we keep talking about.
Absolutely.
Between the live action filmmakers telling real stories in live action and the game guys trying to play to the interactivity.
Put it this way, if we could move around in live action today, we would. We haven't been able to yet, but I think Lightfield is coming, and there's many companies, but two that come to mind to look at are 8i and Lightro. And the notion is shooting from the outside in or the inside out, depending on your approach. But the worlds are merging, for sure.
There's somebody, yeah, here.
So, if we succeeded crafting effective VR, we're not really watching it, we're in it. So essentially we are creating virtual memories for people. Where does responsibility of media creators come in our choice of what we decide to put our audience through?
I think there's a lot of responsibility, but I think the same has been true in film and video games, and maybe it's even more so now because you may believe this is real for a moment. When you're in it, you may forget you're in a room. And I think a lot of people who see virtual reality often experience it as a memory thereafter, whether they're in the shower or they're waking up. It stays in your brain a different way. So I do think there's a responsibility to act appropriately, but there's going to be people who take that seriously, and then there's going to be some people who don't, unfortunately.
I mean, I guess the flip side of that question could be, what's the, even though that's an issue and people could have bad experiences, what's the alternative to, I mean, how would you propose censoring them or stopping it?
It's just more the, just because we can do something, should we? And sort of like, I think a lot of people are reaching out for the low-hanging fruit of first-person shooters, horror films.
Yeah.
But if each of you could think of what would you really like to do that would have some kind of positive impact, and monetary success would not be a concern, what is the kind of stuff that each of you is dreaming to do?
Education, social change, rehabilitation, healthcare.
I mean more like for each of you a particular idea, not like education at large, but if you think of an experience, what is something that?
Well, very specifically, one of the things we're doing on a pro bono basis is we're helping the neuroscience group at UCLA pre-visualize the brain so that the head of neurosurgery, a doctor named Neil Martin, can actually, so for years he's been looking at 3D scans and 3D images of when he's going to go and remove a tumor. But now, working with the Vive system and some of the sort of connection points that we made to kind of help it along, he has the ability to actually spatially see the brain, and he can rehearse the surgery, or his people that are working with him can put the headset on outside of the surgical environment and look 5 times and actually mentally practice, per your point of we're actually creating memories, and see what's behind the things that he doesn't want to damage or cut. Now, he, with probably 35 years of experience, has a better sense than anybody, but training new doctors to do it on a broader basis, giving them a visualization tool where they can actually look behind what's there and kind of do that and go, okay, so I don't want to go there, and I don't want to go there, and I don't want to go there, is a very powerful start to what I refer to as medical advancements in healthcare using this technology.
Just jumping in on that one real quick. So, I definitely think the therapeutic and medical use cases of VR are very promising, but even just from a storytelling standpoint, I think the stuff that Imran has done and some of the stuff that Felix and Paul have done would be sort of case in point. I think news and documentary type cause-related work gets kind of a whole new life in VR because of that ability to teleport them to Syria or to the African plains. I think we've got a project right now where we've partnered with the International War Crimes Investigator or International Crimes Investigator to document rhino poaching. And so we're capturing a rhino's last breath. We're capturing all these different parts of the ecosystem of the rhino poaching trade. And I think the ability to put you next to a dying rhino has never been possible before in quite that same impactful way. So I think those types of properties or projects are perfect for VR, and I think will have that much more impact because of the medium.
And that's sort of the empathy machines. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, I just wanted to say that I think that this also begs the need for a rating system of some sort that at least just helps introduce, particularly parents to this is appropriate for this age group, just like we do with movies and video games. But maybe also it's like a two-pronged system is what I would recommend, is that one is for age appropriate and then another one for intensity level, because of course everything is more intense and sensory overload. So it could be very appropriate for any age as long as you know that your toddler is all about doing roller coasters, like if that's okay for them and the parents judge that's cool, it wouldn't be taboo for them to check that out. So, I think that it's confusing even to us in the industry when you look at the store of all of this VR media, you're like, I'm not sure what I'm embarking on right now as I test out their early demo of this thing.
I like your intensity concept real quickly because I saw one Machete. I don't know if anybody's seen this. It's not that it's gory. It's that it's gory and it's inartfully rendered. And it was the first time I've watched something in probably 20 years where I really wished I could unwatch it because it left me irritated in a profound way that watching a cinematic experience never would, because I just turn it away. But I have this thing on and I'm in a public place and I don't want to insult the filmmaker, so it's an interesting thing. Go ahead.
Your former Imagineer, not former friend, but Imagineer at the Brink VR event at South by, talked about his VR experiences for pediatric cancer survivors. And that to me was like beyond empathy. The stuff he's doing is such vital and important work. It might be worth mentioning. You know him better.
Yeah, I don't remember the specifics. Sorry.
Creating VR, it's basically like Make-A-Wish in VR for pediatric cancer survivors.
Yes.
So they say, does anybody else know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
It's such vital work. Of kids.
Yes, for kids. So, yeah, they're at the hospital, and with VR they can go places. Yeah, we supported that project.
Fight disease, what's the ideal environment to fight disease? And they've actually statistically shown that the VR experiences are helping them.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It was in the USC competition. Yeah, that was really moving. That's some sort of
Pain as well, by the way. There's it's a method of helping people in pain. Is VR. Again, you're bombarding your brain with things that you like, and so you're entertaining in a certain way your brain with that. And
It created some sort of a biofeedback loop where it was actually training your brain. You're getting a physiological cue as a child to feel like you were fighting your cancer cells, and they got these it was super moving.
The example was, where do you want to fight this disease? Somebody said, as an astronaut. So they transported them to fight the disease in situations as an astronaut.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Anne Marie. You stand up.
That's kind of like what Skip Rizzo was doing at USC, institute-based technology, looking initially with soldiers and then now others proactively ahead of time. What I wanted to
What's the? It's hard to.
So you're asking what's the next level for? So engaging you in some sort of interactive feedback loop with a VR experience.
Yeah, I mean, the technology's all there. It's definitely happening. We know, and whether it's a dystopian or utopian use case of it, we can track where people are looking. We can track their somatic system reactions. So how you use that information is, of course, very dangerous, but can also be very powerful in the right hands with the right tool sets. And it's all there. The technology completely exists to do all that.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say something.
Well, yeah, I mean, just one more thing is a lot of people don't realize that this is coming, the social experiential part of VR. I saw at GDC several competing companies that are creating methodologies to literally allow you to tune in on someone else's VR experience and watch as a spectator or sometimes a participant. You see this a lot in esports, when you're watching people play video games in a stadium, and a lot of people say, yeah, VR is kind of this isolated, singular, loner experience. But I mean, if you're at your house with other friends, then usually the fun of it is just watching another monitor showing a portion, probably one of the eyes of the viewer's experience. And it's great to see their reaction and then go, man, you got to try this. So that's the live social experience. But imagine if you can tune in to a massively multiplayer event, basically, where you're seeing other people do activities in VR. It's coming.
Yeah, that's a whole conversation itself. But I wish we had more time for it. There were two more? Because if not, I'll go there. Yeah, right here.
I was just curious. I didn't quite want to talk about it exactly. The scale or metrics of the Martian budget, time, team, and feasibility. I'm sure it was the first experimental thing, but
How long did it take? How many people were on it?
would you directly related to that budget and monetizing? Would you guys do a Samsung VR, version of it?
So we did a short Samsung VR version, which is the intro piece. We are looking at when you have in a next generation world, when you have the ability to have your hands, and because you need your hands to do the whole experience. It's not just your eyes; it's your whole body. As that develops into a mobile environment, not specifically to Samsung, but Samsung is obviously deep into this, we would look at where it goes and goes to a different scale there, absolutely. In terms of the budget and time, we, from a movie studio standpoint, don't share the budget, but I can tell you it was quite significant. It's a big project. It still was a fairly modest amount of people working on it, and a very kind of SWAT team effect. There's some of the studio folks, and then a core team from Chris's company and from Jackie's company, and but 15 to 20 people probably touched it over the course of the year. It's not hundreds of people. It's not like a movie yet, where you watch the credit list and like, 7,000 people worked on this thing. It's not 7,000 people. It's not even 50 people.
And that's, of course, in conditions where the hardware is changing, the drivers that support the hardware is changing, and so it's extra arduous just because of that, to be first on all three tethered platforms and the mobile release.
Did you guys use assets from the movie? I mean, that probably made it a lot easier, right?
Well, we didn't use CG assets from the
No.
movie. We used some of the clips, the visual assets. We actually tried to use some of the CG assets, but because of the nature of
shape.
where the technology was, it was actually, and because it has to happen in real time, so you're driving at 90 frames a second per each eye at 11, 12 milliseconds. It's a completely different technical art form than taking my assets and rendering them out and then delivering them, because they all have to interact with you. So it was a rebuilding exercise, basically.
There's some thinking about, if we knew we were going to do a VR experience in parallel with a film, that we would actually plan on that and maybe have a slightly easier path to branch off to create the asset for real time and then send it down with our best wishes to high-end visual effects.
It's what Chris and I are working on now, is sort of the next initiative, is how do we link these worlds and be able to use the assets for multiple platforms.
Awesome.
There's an issue with pre-visualization
Yeah, we're learning. We're using better tools.
Sometimes they do use the assets, they just slap a better texture on it. A good majority of Alice in Wonderland had a ton of previous built assets in the background. They're like, it's in the background, it's cool. You know?
That's interesting. Yeah, right here.
Were you guys aware of any other films that were trying to do what you were doing? Was Inception, Gravity? Did you guys have any other, like, people saying, wait, you guys are doing this, we should get this done first before you guys, or anybody else?
No, there wasn't a timing thing, but we're very close to all the other studio groups and creative people. We saw a lot of people doing marketing-based experiments and sort of the terminology using VR for PR, which I like that sort of phrase. It's an interesting thing that came up. And we wanted to go much further than that. We see it as a valid art creative form that is starting to mature and deserves a real shot at becoming a real medium, not just a marketing tool to sell a traditional medium. So that was our approach.
Two more. There was one. No? Hardy, go ahead. Ask a question, for God's sake. No? All right. So,
Got one over there.
okay, yeah, back there.
Yeah, so where's the VR watering hole that people are going to collaborate around? Like, is there a website, is there an organization group? And then what's where are like standards going in the future where there's a VR standard file format or there's, because it seems like right now it's kind of the Wild West. Everybody's trying to figure stuff out, but as people are figuring it out, how are people collaborating and going, hey, that guy did this guy did this, other than events like this? Like, how are people communicating as it's going forward, and then therefore coming up with standards where we say, hey, we all just use this standard, and then we don't have to worry about that thing anymore. We move on to this.
I mean, are you in LA?
Yeah.
Okay, so one place to go to meet up is the VRLA conference that's here. There's going to be one, I think, in August. It's called their Summer Expo. Worth checking out. You'll be amazed at the scale of how many players show up there, showing off everything from camera technology to their latest artistic creations, and so that's good. Also, I would say that the standards technically are being defined by the technology that's the display apparatus first and foremost, and also with the cameras themselves specifying what is the maximum or the best practices workflow for that. But I think that what you will find is more resources from the post-production community and different companies that create editing software and image manipulation software finally getting their feet wet in using all this tech and going, oh, by the way, here's a preset that supports this camera and that output. So you won't have to stress about it. In the early days, at least for us, we were toying with the right compression algorithm and resolution and everything for that teaser, and that was like a lot of time that went into that doesn't need to happen again if we can just share some of that knowledge.
I'll mention some online resources that kind of keep people current that work in our sort of field. There's a website called Road to VR. There's a website called Upload VR. These are kind of news trackers just for VR and AR. There's a bunch of others too, but those are two.
The
There's something called Where VR.
Voices of VR.
Voices of
That's
VR.
great.
There's a couple podcasts.
Very good,
There's a Reddit. There's a couple of Reddit forums. There's a Facebook group that some people are on. There's a lot of sort of social, but all of those like Upload VR, Road to VR, Where VR, all have like weekly newsletters you can subscribe to in your email. So it just reminds you each week to kind of, and it reports on the latest things and the latest news. So it's kind of like an Engadget or Gizmodo, but specifically about what we're doing. And they'll report on the current things that are important to track. So there's a little kind of burgeoning, growing industry, just that.
And every single film festival now is a great place to go meet people and hang
Sundance
out.
and
Everyone is doing it. So.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I see. I knew it. Go ahead. So I have a white paper. I'm Seth at Seth Shapiro. Phil has a white paper. Is it Phil at phillelyveld.com? There's a white paper there. Yeah, you can email me, Seth at Seth Shapiro. I have one too. But what was your question? Was that it?
I'm just curious, like, so the medium is so raw. When you guys get somebody new to put them in something to show the potential of the medium, what's your current best piece of content that shows the potential of the medium?
It's a good
It's not
question.
just like technical demo, it's a tool. What do you think is there anything yet that can
I'll do a shameless plug. So we've got we've got a project with the Sci-Fi Channel, Sci-Fi Network, called Halcyon, and it's had very limited, access for public or people to come by and check it out. But it's pretty compelling because it's full room scale, so you can track around. You get to piece together a crime scene. It sounds like it shares some of the sort of DNA or thinking that The Martian went through in terms of how to lead somebody through kind of a room scale or more interactive, immersive experience. And so far, we've been pretty proud of it so far.
Anyone else want to?
I think if you have 2 minutes, I would show you the introduction to virtual reality, which we've done 2 versions. We just finished the second one for the release of the Samsung Galaxy 7, and we did that with Oculus. And that's essentially just a montage of all our work. And we've released about 13, 14 things to date, virtual reality experiences. And if someone has more time, I usually try to give them a variety. I'd show them Jurassic World. I might show them Wild to show them like a studio piece. And then I show them LeBron James for 13 minutes in South Beach. You're with him and his entourage. And then lastly, I would show you Sea Gypsies, which is a kind of meditative piece we released at Sundance. It's part of a 3-part series where you're with a nomadic tribe and you're with their world and their people for 1 day. So we did Mongolia, we shot in Kenya with the Maasai tribe, and then we also shot in Borneo with the Sea Gypsies. So Sea Gypsies is the one I usually show. Yeah.
Do you want to close with that? You want one more question? While I get it. Anybody got one more? Yeah, go ahead. Sea Gypsies. Oh, okay. Go ahead.
On that, the immersive documentary products, are those on Steam? Where can you get access to them?
Mostly Gear VR. Clouds Over Sidra is a really good touch point.
Yeah.
Verse.
Good touch point.
Yeah, I mean, I think Clouds Over Sidra is about 1.5 years old now, but there's a lot of films that we've done since, I guess, Waves of Grace, and a lot of them coming through. The Displaced was the one that's on the New York Times VR app, also in the Verse app. I'm the worst pitch man, or like.
Which are yours?
The Displaced that's probably from my mind, it's the best of those kind of films. And then we have obviously a lot of work in progress.
That's Lynette's thing, the Aborigines piece. Is that?
No, the Displaced was we did over about 4 months in the Bekaa Valley in Libya, Syria, and then in South Sudan and in the Ukraine. And that's gave you quite a big survey. It really puts you in these children's lives, and you get to see and also hopefully feel kind of their pain. I believe it's definitely in the New York Times app. Yeah, you can watch it on the cardboard. You can watch it on you can watch it on the Oculus. You can watch it on whatever you want. I think that's what the New York Times set it up to do. They sent 1.2 million Google Cardboards out with the film last year. I think if you know anybody who had the New York Times, they got it.
Yeah,
I think you can. Yeah, I think you can probably watch it on like YouTube 360 and all those kind of things as well.
Any more recommendations, or I'll just roll this? One more? I mean, no one's left. You guys all seem okay. Are there any more? Okay, yeah, Phil.
Where would you like to see the mass market equipment stabilize at? Currently, it's heading towards the cardboard. Do you want it to be the cardboard with core capabilities? Mass market, not specialized, because you want to do things that are special for the high end, like the market. So, do you want the mass market to be the full hand track?
Well, it has to be close to immersive. Has to give the sense of presence. For me, that would be the entry level. Right now, we're just, the 360 is breaking the retinal, it's okay, but there's no elements for feeling immersed. And if I'm watching a 360 video with my phone like this, there's no immersiveness. Even just the sound will be a first step. So if you look at the top of the line now, something better than that should come down here.
Yeah, I think that the statistics are computing power-wise that the roadmap at the end of 2017 is that the mobile platforms will be as strong, if not stronger, than the Xbox 360, Xbox Ones and PlayStation 4s of today. Yeah. So the only real problem is, I guess, battery power to drive those. But hopefully you can put that on your back or something. But we're looking forward to untethered VR headsets that are not too expensive, but also premium enough to create full sense of presence and immersion. and have a larger field of view than just the goggles, because I think if you go into your peripheral vision, that's going to be very, very convincing. And of course, hand controllers. However, I think controllers are going to be kind of blasé pretty soon. I think you're just going to use your hands. You know, there's a reason why there's forward-facing cameras. It's not just for the potential AR capabilities. You know.
So do you think the market will standardize so you'll be able to do that and reach the mass market? Or do you think everybody will have their own form?
I think, I mean, it's going to be, all the content creators will be creating for the platforms that distribute the best VR to the most people. And those people will, those platforms will set the standard for what an app needs to be compatible to be on that store, just like on iTunes or whatever. So we'll be playing to those champions, and I think there's some dark horses we haven't seen out. The battle is not over for distribution.
I think also you're going to see the tethered headsets today, which are the best headsets, become basically the mobile headsets. The mobile headsets will be as good as the tethered headsets. The tethered headsets will be better, but you know, I think also you're going to get a mobile headset for free with your phone, or for very cheap with your phone. That's going to be the Samsung Gear, which is Oculus's partner. You're going to see a Google headset that's higher grade than the cardboard, and eventually you may see an Apple headset. So I think we're going to piggyback off of sort of something you buy every year or two, and that's going to be a gateway, but ultimately we'll ditch the phones entirely, and there'll be just a premium mobile headset that has a computer in it.
Yeah, and from my world, I just lobby in the most, and you've heard me say this, and you've heard me say this, in the most diplomatic way I can, in the camp of not good enough. Everything we're doing is remarkable, important, it matters a lot. But if anybody in our industry thinks that we are at a state where anything that is in the hardware camps is good enough to actually go really, really mass market and really change the dynamic of media, we are nowhere close. We are, and I got in some trouble for saying this, but I say we are in the brick cell phone days of VR, in all of its forms. Super transformational, right? I mean, the fact that it was this giant thing and you could take it and make a phone call from the beach and in your car was fantastic, but it's nowhere near this, right? So where we're headed is this, and then where this is going to head in the next couple of years, and those need to kind of run in parallel, and I think it's all of our responsibilities as evangelists and purveyors of the medium to push everybody that will be making money in the hardware game to simply say, you are nowhere near good enough. And when I talk to the heads of every company, which I do quite a bit, and we are working very closely in many iterations down the road, so in their secret part of our worlds, we're seeing the future. And we see that it's a very bright future. So what you're seeing today is not what you will see tomorrow. It will not be the same kind of experience, and you will not be using the kind of tools. Just like, think about how much different that giant first cell phone you bought is from an iPhone or a latest Android phone. That's the curve that we need to make sure we stay on. That's what I believe.
Either you guys? Guido?
Hallelujah.
Okay. All right.
It's every day. I'm fighting a good fight.
Thank these guys. They're great. We'll run this.